I think some of those may join us in a minute, but we'll go ahead and get started in the interest of time. And if you've seen the agenda, I'm going to turn it right back to Dr. Nolte and follow the agenda as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Francis. Members of the board, we have about 21 or 22 people in the meeting, board members, board attorney, and staff. We are also live streaming, so other people are listening live or have the ability to do that. Plus, we'll record this and post it as normal. So just wanted to give you that up front. Board members, as you all had asked about during one of our previous meetings, just to give you a number of updates. Trevor Putnam and Jill Barker were teasing me earlier today that we had 9 or 10 board meetings in the last 2 months. And I think that's just the nature of where we are right now. We're not able to meet face-to-face. And so we have to have these meetings in order to just keep everybody apprised. And tonight is about information. And of course, we have our regular meeting later on Monday, which is the normal regular meeting. So what I'm going to do, and this will be quite lengthy, and I'll try to pause along the way if you have questions, but I'm going to give an update on state guidance on the reopening of schools. We emailed to you all earlier in the day. Excuse me, I'm looking for my big packet here. We emailed to you all earlier in the day, and we will make much of this public by posting on our website. People can also, if you're listening in to the live stream, can just go to the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services and look for their document, Strong Schools NC Public Health Toolkit for K-12. It's quite lengthy. We received it on the 8th. It was distributed to school systems and made public, I think, on the 9th. And we've had a number of conversations related to this with statewide superintendents meetings and regional superintendents meetings. There is a companion document that is even longer than this. It has lots of pictures, and you click on the pictures, and the companion document is from public schools, Department of Public Instruction and State School Board, and it links you to some 260 some odd pages of guidance. I think the best way to understand this is that the public school document gives us lots of ideas and examples. It does not differ in any way, form, or fashion from the document that I sent you regarding the regulations that we have been given and what we have been asked to do. Some of this document is very, very clear. Some of it is unclear, and I'll tell you in a little detail in just a moment about what we've done, tried to do to get some clarity. And you all know that I try to be very professional, especially in public meetings. But some of this is just, some of the guidance and the feedback that we got is just subpar. And I'll talk to you about that and our feelings about that as we go through. So you'll excuse me for not being as stoic and professional as I normally do during some parts of this. The guidance, interestingly enough, on the front cover is actually titled Interim Guidance as of June the 8th, which right up front, that tells you this is what they were telling us on the 8th. They made it very clear in subsequent meetings that this information can change. That is very frustrating if you're people like me and all the staff members in the meeting, principals and other folks, when you're trying to make plans to reopen school, if you know some of it's going to change. Just extremely frustrating. The companion document from the Department of Public Instruction was described by State Superintendent Johnson as a living document, and it was described in much the same way. It very likely will change. I think in terms of our boundaries or fences or rules, the document that I sent you holds those rules, and the information from the state is primarily just, well, you might try it this way, you might try it that way, or this way might not work. So anyway, it's interim guidance. On page 1, it just talks about some general things about how the document was put together and the signs and symptoms of COVID. I'm not going to read all of this to you because you can read it, but I did want to point out some things that I think are key, and then some challenges or limitations that I think we still face. On page 2, under how should the toolkit be used, there's a little section that tells us that these are the rules, after they've already told us those rules could change. But there's a little sentence that says local education leaders are required to use this guidance to understand health practices they must meet and to develop detailed district school plans for how to implement all required health practices in the toolkit. So basically they're saying up front, these are the health rules, all right? I do think some of those will change, and I hope that they will be relaxed. That's a personal hope on the part of your superintendent. The next little thing under that is, who will decide how schools can reopen and stay safe? And it states that the governor's office, Health and Human Services, in consultation with the state school board and DPI, will determine how schools can reopen safely for 2021. I'm paraphrasing just a little bit, but the most, I think, important thing for us to get out of this little paragraph, it says that they will tell us how we will reopen by July 1st. So that's a key marker date. They're telling us by July 1st, they're going to tell us how we reopen. They have given us in this booklet and the companion document directions to create 3 plans, okay? Plan A, B, and C. That's a little confusing because I think the governor's information is phases, and the State High School Athletic Association might even use another term. But for the reopening of school, we're to have 3 plans available, and they will tell us which plan we are to use. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. Plan A is minimal social distancing. When this was being constructed, we had some superintendents across the state, some that I know personally, who provided feedback in meetings. The common language for this plan was a hard start on August the 17th, which means we're going to go under Plan A. If we use Plan A, we're all going to go. There aren't going to be, or there will not be, any caps on the number of students at the school. There will be some social distancing requirements, but those will be more in common areas like offices and areas where the public might interact with the folks on campus. That, I think, is the plan that most of the superintendents that I have spoken with across the state, that is the plan that we hope that we will have announced on July the 1st. The second plan, well, let me do the third one first. The third plan, Plan C, is remote learning or some representation thereof. That's what we did really, really well compared to other school systems. I am confident that if we are asked to do Plan A or Plan C, that we will be able to do those. There's a ton of work in both of those. Plan A requires hand sanitizers in every room and health screenings as people enter campus. But we've been working very, very hard on that. In particular, Dr. Putnam and his people ordering things like thermal thermometers and sanitizer, and various stations. So plan A, we can pull off the hard start with everyone on board. And plan C, we can certainly do, because we did it for about 3 months. Plan A certainly is better for children learning and interacting with each other. Plan C, I think, is a worst case scenario in terms of learning. It is my very strong opinion as your superintendent that Plan B, as described to us by the state, is not physically possible. They have given us lots and rules of regulations that don't make sense. They've told us that, we can run our buses, but we have to keep students 6 feet apart on the bus. That would only apply to Plan B, and we don't think that's physically possible. We had a statewide superintendent's meeting late yesterday, and it frankly was a waste of an hour and a half for those of us who listened to it. The folks from Health and Human Services wanted to tell us how Plan B was put together. They did not want to answer questions that were being posted in the chat column about real world questions. And so they did tell us that they would go back and try to rethink some of their guidance in Plan B. I do not know if that will happen or not. So let me pause just for a minute to see if you have any questions about when we'll know, or if you want any details about Plan A, B, or C that could be used next school year. Okay, as a former teacher, I'm going to say that that is enough wait time when you ask a question and don't get a response. But we can always come back. You guys know we can always come back. The next section is really about social distancing. And so I'm going to tell you the things that would generally apply, and they're written down as requirements. And just know that they're much more stringent in Plan B. But in Plan A, we would need to absolutely require social distancing in common areas where visitors might be found. Waiting areas, reception areas, areas where parents or other people might come in and out. That's the first little square on page 3. If you go down to the 4th square on the left side, and again, we'll make this available and publish it shortly, plus people can go look it up. The 4th square on page 3 on the left column really talks to the use of our facilities by the community or by people who are not directly connected to Haywood County Schools. And this is under Plan A, the least restrictive plan. And it says limit non-essential visitors and activities involving external groups or organizations. In our conversations with people, we understand that to mean that we really shouldn't have facility use contracts or other things in place unless we get additional direction on that, because that's mixing groups. I think, like I said, there's still a lot not to be known about what all this document means. I think if we hit a phase 3, we should go back and look at that and reconsider that and see how phase 3 is described. Any other questions about social distancing? And again, I'm giving you the least restrictive view, which is Plan A. All right, great. On page 5, they talk about face coverings, and they talk about not only face coverings, but recommendations that they're making for information for the public. Face coverings and again, this is Plan A, and I think also Plan B, are strongly recommended, excuse me. I've been talking a lot today. Strongly recommended, but not required. Okay. And then a couple other items on that page that I think are really, really interested. We are to share information with staff, students, and families about the proper use of not only face coverings, but cleaning and other information with students and staff in the community. And Mrs. Barker can talk a little bit about this later, but we are strongly considering changing our professional development day in the fall to have more information about that rather than the traditional art, music, PE, math, science sessions. Any questions about that? There's a short section on protecting vulnerable populations, and that's just letting people know that they need to report to us if they are at high risk because of some underlying health condition. I mentioned this earlier, one of the requirements under the cleaning and hygiene section, and there are lots of requirements there, but I think the one that will be most visible to the community is that we'll have sanitizer at 60% or more in every classroom and at every entrance. That's quite an undertaking, but again, our support services folks under Dr. Putnam's guidance is working on that, and we think we can pull that one off. Again, just raise a question, folks, if you have one along the way. We will also screen everyone that enters the building. I will tell you that there is a raging debate among people who work in schools and some of the folks with Health and Human Services about whether or not we have to screen everyone before they get on a school bus, and who would do that, and can they get a waiver for that. So I don't want to speculate too much other than the proposed requirement and the practicality of actually carrying that out, even under Plan A, is still under debate. Trying to go quickly. I know this is exciting information. I tell principals and staff people all the time that sometimes we talk about stuff that is not really interesting, but it's really, really important. There are some requirements for us to put up signage, as you would expect, not only on cleaning and hygiene for people, but also on travel routes inside buildings and in areas where we would be required to keep people 6 feet apart, even under the least restrictive plan. There are some guidelines in here for what we do if we think someone is symptomatic, and that requires them wearing a mask if they can tolerate it. You can imagine a 6-year-old, that might not be a good thing for them to wear a mask, but we have that kind of guidance here, and it seems pretty reasonable, the guidance on if we think someone is symptomatic. There is a requirement, and this is work that Mrs. Barker and Kim and Jeff and a lot of the principals have already been working on, that we will provide remote learning options for students who are unable to come to school if they are sick. All right. So there's the potential, even under the least restrictive plan of Plan A, that we might be running 2 instructional streams for students in the same classroom. We think we can do that. We think that would cost some money, but we do have some COVID money that we are not, we hope we don't have to spend on masks or sanitizers or thermometers that could help us do that if we need to. Any questions thus far? Just a few more sections here.
Dr. Nolte, I do have a question. I know, referring back to if kids are symptomatic, are we going to be able to do testing like school nurses? Are we going to have the ability to do any of that, or what? Are we going to have to send them somewhere else to be tested?
That's a great question. Our direction in this guidance is to isolate the person who may be symptomatic. So let me just give a real world example. We point the thermometer at a student. You know, it's a no-touch thermometer, and it shows a temperature 100.4 or higher. Then our directions at that time are to isolate that student, certainly offer them a mask and ask them to wear it if they can tolerate it, and then get them to their family and a medical provider. And then it would be the responsibility of the medical provider to determine if the student needs to be tested for COVID-19, or based upon the medical provider's knowledge of that person's medical history, they would say, no, this happens to them periodically because of X. In those situations, when we would make a referral out, we would rely on the medical provider to tell us whether or not the person could return. I'll tell you a little bit more about how long people need to stay out in just a minute, but that is also a little confusing from Health and Human Services. Any other questions about that? It's a good question. Okay, there are some requirements in here for us to make sure that we disseminate information that helps people who may have misinformation. That sounds a little funny, but frankly, we've done that for decades. When we fear measles is coming through, we send information out and tell them about it, tell people about it, ask them to do certain things. We send information out during flu season. If we have other conditions that are coming through, whooping cough, those kinds of things, not trying to make light of it, but we pretty regularly send out information anymore, but that's included in these directives. Under the transportation area, I've already mentioned this a little bit earlier, but there are requirements for cleaning and disinfecting those vehicles. I know you all have have heard Dr. Putnam talk before about the machines that we have that we can use, and so we think we will be prepared to do that in cleaning the vehicles. And again, there is this debate about whether or not students' parents can sign some kind of attestation that their kid is not sick and not have them screened on the bus, but we would still need to screen them later. We certainly, I would say, in general, need to get the Health and Human Services guidelines in line with how we practically operate schools. Excuse me for editorializing, but I have heard it said, and I have repeated several times, that COVID-19 is really not an educational problem. Okay, it is a communicable disease situation, like the flu or other disease that are communicated. It's become pretty apparent based upon conversations just that we see in the news, particularly the national news and state news, that it is now part of a political debate. And so what I and other superintendents have asked our state officials to do is to give us a final practical word on the health and political bottom line. And once they do that, then we'll figure out the educational part. We have plenty of really smart people who can figure that out. But right now, I don't think that those two sides of the issue are together. We will continue to ask them, but what we really need are rules that we can follow, that everybody thinks is reasonable, and then we'll follow them. Okay. Any questions about that part in transportation? Almost done here. I know this is not very exciting. Okay, so toward the end of the document, on page 13, there's a diagram that talks a little bit about, and I may have missed the days out part. I can go back to that. The days the people would need to be out if they tested positive or if they were asymptomatic. But that ranges from 10 to 14 days, depending upon some of the descriptors that they've given us. But on page 13, it gives a diagram of plan A, B, and C. And like I said earlier, A and C are cumbersome, but it's certainly possible to physically carry either of those out. And we certainly want A, because we've not had our students in a long time and we miss them, and we think the learning will certainly be much better if we're face-to-face. Plan B is very, very restrictive in terms of only having 50% capacity and keeping 6 feet apart, and we're not sure that our classrooms are big enough or our buses are big enough to do that justice. But we will be working on these plans, and we'll certainly share them in detail with you when we have them together in a couple weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. One of the most interesting things, it's sort of like we're going to tell you what you're doing on July 1st. On page 13, it says, school districts may choose to implement a more restrictive plan, but may not choose to implement a least restrictive plan than determined by Health and Human Services, the State Board, and DPI. So I think, see Mr. Francis shaking his head there. What that means is if they give us plan B at any point in time, on the first day of school or 3 months into school or in February, and that plan B is, I've not talked to a single person, and I've been in a meeting with nearly 150 people and another meeting with 17 people. I've not talked to anyone yet who can explain to me how you can physically do that plan. But let's say they gave us plan B. We could choose as a school system to do plan C, the remote learning. The downside of that is it's not as good as having some of the students at school. The learning is not as good. The extracurricular opportunities are not as good. But we could not choose, if we had the very restrictive plan B, we could not choose plan A. And so that's the direction. And it seems pretty clear from this document that the state is plans to make a consistent decision for us across the state, or at least across regions. They've not been very clear about, would that apply to the whole state or would it apply to areas of the state?
You answered my question right there. I was wondering if they could do that in districts or however. So, okay.
Yeah, they haven't told us. They've told us that they're going to tell us which plan we should be on. They did not say, if Western North Carolina would be different than the Charlotte metro area or the Outer Banks, but they did tell us that they would be consistent. So any general questions? I have a few general rumor mill things that are very much rumor mill that I'd like to share, and then we'll proceed through the remainder of the agenda. Any other questions about what we know thus far about the reopening? They'll tell us something on July the 1st. We can be more restrictive than the plan they give us, not less restrictive. And Plan B, for lack of a better term, is just a mess. And I'm not sure if it can be physically accomplished, but we will certainly work over the coming weeks to put one together that can be practically implemented.
Does Plan B, is that the one I keep hearing something about dividing the kids into two sections and having, so many kids come on Monday, so many kids on Tuesday, and alter that back and forth? And
that is yes, in short. That's the when you hear those kinds of things, they're talking about things that could happen in Plan B. Plan B is a 50% cap on your school, plus keeping people 6 feet apart at all times. If you can imagine that in a classroom, plus keeping people 6 feet apart on a bus. And again, y'all know I'm not much of an alarmist. I'm usually pretty calm and straightforward and positive, but I just see Plan B as a lawsuit that the state loses when we decide who can ride the bus and who can't. And we've had several superintendents point out to state health and human services folks that we have 2-hour bus runs. And even if we run our buses back to back, we can only have them 6 feet apart. We can't get them there.
No.
So there are big problems with Plan B. I feel very confident with our ability. We have smart people, as do some of our neighboring school systems. I feel very confident with our ability to have schools safely, as safely as it can be with Plan A. And we can do it with Plan C too, the remote learning stuff, but we just don't want to do that. We don't want to do the remote learning unless we have to. It's just not as effective.
We definitely just need to be, and in my opinion too, I've read over some of that, like I say, Plan B is just almost impossible. And so there's a few people that I think they just don't know what they're doing when they designed that plan. And but either way, another thing I was thinking, with parents that are school teachers, what if their child's going to go on A day and then they got to teach on B day? And so then how are they going to start having to take care of their children? I mean, there's just so many things in that plan that just is, to me, it's just terrible. And then, like I say, Plan A, we can go more restrictive. So I'm hoping that's where they'll go with, and that's where I'm lobbying. At least let us make that decision.
You're right, Mr. Rogers. Your example is I heard from superintendents as well as many other things. There are so many complications with students in elementary, middle, and high school all in the same family, and the possibility of their children not being in the right rotation or the same rotation. There are problems with Plan B that the state's going to have to work on, I think, if we're going to be able to use it.
Dr. Nolte, I'd like to point out that a lot of the general population here in Haywood County or across the state feel that the school board has a say-so in this, and I've tried to explain to them the governor's office has been, who's leading this, and Department of Health and Human Resources have been, they're setting what we're supposed to do, and our hands are tied.
Yeah, and y'all know I can talk a lot. I don't want to extend the meeting unnecessarily, but I went on record when schools first closed in the middle of March and said we could have gone 2 weeks longer, and we did not get to exercise my opinion. I didn't even have a chance to come to you all as a board and have you all pass some kind of resolution or vote with me. When they closed, they closed. And so I think your point is well made, Mr. Francis. There are things that we control, but in this current situation, a lot of those things are out of our hand. I'm not trying to pass the buck. I think people know us and that we're all pretty outspoken and pretty determined, and none of us mind making a decision. We've made lots of hard ones through the years as a board and as administrators, but this one is going to be dictated to us in many ways.
I have had several people do the same thing, ask me why did, we closed down and, why couldn't we stay open a little longer and all that. And I told them it wasn't our decision. It was the governor that made the decision and we had no say in it.
Dr. Nolte, I know you touched on in there about having the vehicles, the buses and stuff. There's a protocol on having them cleaned. What about class? Does it say anything about classrooms? Are they going to have to be cleaned down every night, or did it go into that detail?
Yeah, that will have to be done. The thing that I feel pretty good about there, Mr. Francis, is our people started working on that possibility really shortly after we were closed the first time, and started ordering those things that I have called Ghostbuster guns. I've been chastised for calling them that, but we do have those foggers that have a chlorine tablet component that Dr. Putnam has explained in meetings with you all and I think meetings with the commissioners. And we feel pretty confident that we have the technology and the resources with the COVID related money that the state has given us, that we can keep things pretty clean on a daily basis. So we feel good about that part of it.
I think instead of having to test you to see if weapons, we can have a system set up that sprays you down when you walk through there. We'll sell a lot of, there'll be a lot of backpack sprayers.
Yeah. Well, I know you're joking just a little bit. Yeah. We won't have to spray them down, but I do think that we have the resources and the capacity to keep things pretty clean if they'll let us come under some reasonable real life rules. And we want to do that. It's just better for learning if we can have students in the building.
Thank you, Dr. Nolte, for the update. You want to go on with the next item?
Yes.
Dr.
Nolte, I guess that's me.
You're up.
All right. Chairman Fraston, board members, Dr. Nolte, Dr. Putnam, and Jill Barker. We did something a little different last week. We did graduation in a different way. And we started off on Monday at the Haywood Community Learning Center with a drive-through graduation. We had the first person that came up was a girl who graduated and drove up from Austin, Texas to get her diploma. So that was very moving. We had a young lady come through the line with her baby with her. And that was moving. And we had a young lady come through and she was so excited to get her diploma. She was shaking and tears were going down her eyes to where it made me cry because she was not able to drive hardly, but did a drive-through at the Learning Center. Tuesday and Wednesday, we were at Tuscola High School. It was a drive up and get out of your car and walk up onto the stage where you could watch your child graduate. And they did that. They did a great job of that in the parking lot. It was well run. The comments I got from Tuscola High School are a kid told Mr. Trantham they loved graduation because they were able to bring their dog to graduation. One grandparent said that one grandparent was on oxygen and was able to attend. So she pulled up and my note says they pulled her out of the car, but I think they escorted her out of the car, so I shouldn't say that being recorded, but they helped her out of the car, and she got to walk up to the stage and watch her granddaughter graduate. She said she wouldn't have been able to do that at Western Carolina University. And at the end of the ceremony, I just happened to be there. We had a young lady whose mom was hung up in traffic and could not get there, and they just told her, stand off to the side and relax. And Mom was about 10 to 15 minutes out, and I was standing there, and the walkie-talkie said, Mom's coming through the gate. So Mom got to drive through the gate, get out of the car, and got to see her daughter graduate. And she was very excited because that would not have happened. Thursday, we was down at Central Haywood High School. Very unique graduation. Keith Roden had about 2 days with those kids as principal, and then had to plan a graduation for kids he did not know. He did it in the parking lot. Mr. Roden did an outstanding job of trying to find ways to get those kids to a really nice graduation. We went and walked the stadium. We did all kinds of stuff. It ended up in the parking lot. It looked like a drive-in movie. Everybody was parked. They stayed in the car. He called up 4 kids. They walked across the stage, got their diploma, and they were so thankful that at the end, Mr. Roden said, you can go ahead and blow your horns. It's okay. So they blew the horns and celebrated. And then the Clyde police took them on an escort through Clyde, which was really, really neat. On Friday, we were at Pisgah High School. Pisgah High School did a drive-through. They entered the upper gate, come around back of the building, and come up. They pulled 4 groups of families up. They got out of their cars, took pictures, had a stage set up, and the comments from Pisgah High School were a lot of community involvement, very personal feel with the kids and the family. The first kid to walk through Pisgah High School was a young lady who had been battling cancer. They set it up. She could come through at 9 o'clock, and she got to go through. So that was a moving experience too. Haywood Early College, we're still holding out for them on August 7th over at Haywood Community College. So are there any questions about graduation?
There's no question, just a comment that I do again. I was really hoping we could do more, but I think what we did was fantastic. Now, what you guys did, not me, but what you did and what y'all planned was such an excellent procession. And like you said, we had those experiences that normally at Western Carolina Transit Center, we would not have had that. Those kids would not have had that experience. So it was made the best of it in bad times. Everything was made the best it could be. And so I applaud all the schools, the principals, the staff, central office. Thank you guys so much.
Mr. Rogers, I saw a photograph of one of the graduates, a professional photograph, and in the background, it did not look real. And so I asked the parent, I said, where was this taken? It's taken on the hill at Tuscola. Those mountains in the background were unbelievable. You would not, it was as good of a graduation photograph I've ever seen. So we made really good. The weather held up, so we had a real great graduation week. Thank y'all.
Hey, Jeff, this is Ronnie Clark. I just want to say I had about a dozen people compliment, mostly Pisgah, but Tuscola, on how good it was with what we had, to work with. So I had a lot, all good feedback, no negative at all. So I just wanted to say that, and everybody did a great job, and thank you all. So
thank you very much.
All right, Mr. Shepherd's up.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so just a little update on the driver's ed program. It's kind of disappointing, but we've not been able to restart it yet. We have been in contact with Carl Logan, who runs the program for the state, on 2 or 3 different occasions and through emails. And he's a big part of the reopening plan. But as you can imagine, if you think about the complications of bus transportation, you put that on an even closer scale in a car, with students. So you're sitting, 8 to 16 inches away from a kid in the front seat, and then, pretty close in the back for an extended period of time. It's kind of the worst case scenario if we're not trying to spread the germs. So we're looking for direction to come, and we had some hints at what might be to come. We were told that we could start using our driver's education funds for purchasing masks and sanitation supplies for the cars. So we've purchased a few things so far. We're hoping in the next few days we will be able to reopen the program. With that being said, we were polled by Mr. Logan, and we all decided that we definitely wanted to open the behind the wheel section first and get those kids that are, kind of in the queue to be driven cleared out first. We have roughly 130, 140 of those in the county between Pisgah, Tuscola, and Early College. And we just thought before we actually started trying to teach any more classes and get more kids into that fray, we would get the ones cleared out first. So that'll be step one whenever we do start back. I've also heard that we may be doing some virtual remote type classes for driver's ed for the first maybe half of the school year until Christmas. That's not been confirmed either, but we have been asked how many of our folks would be willing and able to get trained on a learning platform called Canvas. That's not the one we use in Haywood County, but it is a platform that the state uses through DPI. And I don't think it would be an issue for our folks to learn how to use it. And we would present online instruction, not so much, in a format where you go online, do chapter 1, finish it, do chapter 2, but more like you would have to log on at a certain time and get instruction from a live teacher. And then it may be augmented with lessons that you would do on your own to help get your hours. We've also, there's all kinds of things been flying around in the legislature about things like what might be waived and what not be waived and all that kind of stuff. The only thing that's really gained traction right now is the fact that for kids who have had their permit for the full year and have been waiting to get into a DMV office, the requirement to have a road test, to actually go out on a road test with a DMV person, could be waived. But that's just passed through the House and not the Senate yet, so that one's still up in there too. So do any of you have any questions about the driver's ed program right now?
Were you able to get that other car?
We did get a car. We did get a new Camry. We got a brake put in it. We've been trying to drive it around right now, and even Mr. Haney and Amy at my office will put one person in the passenger seat, one in the driver's seat, and we try to stretch that cable out. Get a few miles on the car before we send it out with students. So we've got that one ready to go. It's scheduled to go down to Stereo Innovations, I think the first week in July, to get a camera installed. We also like to put cameras in the cars now for the protection of the students and the instructors. So we try our best to get those in them before they go out as well. So we're in good shape, on vehicles and equipment right now. We're just waiting to get cranked back up.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Shepherd? Well, we continue on, Miss Shipman. I believe she's next on the agenda.
Thank you, Chairman Francis. Good evening, everyone. I just want to give a quick update on our summer camps. Back about a month ago, we received some guidance. It was health and safety guidance for childcare settings from DHHS. And we began to work through those 8 pages or so of that guidance. And we began talking with principals, with Dr. Nolte, Dr. Putnam, and Ms. Barker's support. We began talking with principals and having some meetings to plan and discuss the guidance and survey the staff that would be interested in working in our camps if it was possible that we could open up. We also participated in a webinar, and we also participated in training our after-school summer camp directors and our other summer camp staff members. So a lot of planning took place, and each site completed an application to be able to reopen those child care setting sites. We had some help with a couple of our directors in developing a common application packet where our parents could apply for their children to participate in our summer camps. So we were able to open up this week on Monday, June 8th, and we were able to open up at 5 different sites at Clyde Elementary, North Canton, Bethel, Jonathan Valley, and Junaluska. We had a couple of sites that were not able to open because they just did not have enough staff to be able to operate. But we were excited to be able to open and provide this service for our working parents that really were in a bind this summer and really desperately needed childcare for their children. So what we're doing, some of the things that we are doing, I won't be able to name everything because the guidance is extensive. There have been several updates on that guidance, even since May 8th. And some of the things that we're doing, we are conducting daily health screenings of our staff and our students with temperature checks with the touchless thermometers. And thanks to Dr. Putnam for making sure that all of our sites had those touchless thermometers. We are working with smaller groups of students. We are allowed to be within ratio, which is 1 adult per 25 students, but we are operating under that for the safety of our children. We have really reduced our group sizes and put limitations on those. So we're operating with about 1 student per 12 children. We're really limiting the exposure of students to different adults. We're really trying to keep it with 1 or 2 adults assigned to a particular group. We have also assigned groups of students to a certain space, and we are not exchanging spaces to cut down on any exchanging of germs that could happen. We have also provided individualized materials for our students to limit the use of shared supplies. We are practicing social distancing with clear markings on the floors, at table spaces and chairs and things like that. We are utilizing the signage that was provided to us by DHHS to make sure that people remember that we are practicing social distancing, and to also remind them to practice good hygiene with sneezing into their elbows and good hand washing. We have also limited the overall cap for the number of students that we take into our summer camps, just to keep our numbers a little lower while trying to accommodate our parents. We've had great participation. We are cleaning lots. We are following the health and safety guidance that was provided by DHHS, and we are cleaning and sanitizing between activities and supplying the hand sanitizer for everyone with hygiene stations upon entering the door. So it's going really well. I've been able to visit some of our sites this week and talk to all of our directors this week on how it's going, and been talking to our principals and thanking them for their efforts, because I know they have worked really, really hard in the preparation for all of this. And I'm telling you what, it was just really, really good to see kids in our building, in all of those buildings. And I told our directors when I was out there at the sites that they would have to hold me back, because I felt like I needed to run and hug on some of those kids, but I did not do that. But I really, really wanted to. It was just good to see the smiles on all of their faces, and I could tell that they were very excited to be back with their peers. So we had a great start. We were a little nervous about it, but we had a great start, and I'm really, really proud of our people. Do y'all have any questions for me?
Sound like it's going really well.
I just have one as far as capacity or where are we at it? Are we full everywhere or do you still have some space available?
That's a great question. We do have some space still available at some of our sites, and I would recommend for anyone interested just to call those particular sites. I know, I wouldn't think it's filled up in the past couple of days, but I know they did have some sites at Jonathan Valley still yet to fill. And I know that a couple of the sites are taking students from other sites that are not able to operate because of staffing. So we do have some sites available or some spaces available at those sites. I would recommend for anyone interested just to call those directors and work with them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job, Miss Shipman. Trying to get back to the agenda. Who's next?
Thank you.
Next, I think we have Ms. Barker.
Good evening, Chairman Francis and members of the board. I just want to echo what Kim and she has worked really hard on this. I wish you could see that document of guidance. I think when we all looked at it at first, we were like, oh goodness. But what I want you to know is our principals, our elementary principals, and at the central office, we're like, we're doing this. Our kids are coming back. We're going to provide this for our parents. Everybody was in agreement about that. And so I just want to applaud them. They wanted the kids back at school. They wanted to offer that for their parents, and Kim's led them through that very well. And so they're back in our building. So I just want to say thank you for that. But I got to tell y'all something. You're not going to believe this. I've got good news. That's right. Good news. And all the COVID, I'm super excited to tell you about a grant that we started working on within at the central office before COVID starting. It is a federal grant. It was available for any school that was in comprehensive school improvement, and that in our district is Central Haywood High School. Most of the alternative schools in the state have this designation, not all of them, but a large majority of them. And so we began working on that grant pre-COVID, and then COVID occurred, and we didn't let that go. I'm so thankful we didn't, but we found out, I guess about a week ago, that we received that grant. I want to tell you a lot about it. I think you're going to be super excited, but I want to thank a few people. John Sanderson was the interim principal at the time. And if y'all know John, he and I talked on the phone, and I told him, I said, John, this is a big grant. What do you think? And he's like, well, we should just apply. We should just do this. And I said, John, you're an interim principal. You got to do some. And he was more than willing to collect data. He collected all kinds of survey data from parents and teachers and kids. He did all kinds of interviews and just a lot of other pieces of information that were critical in that grant. Jeff Haney worked really closely with Susan Evans to get a lot of historical attendance data, dropout data, discipline data. And also he, as a former principal, was very instrumental in capturing some of the former history and vision of that school. Dr. Bill read it and reread it and read it and reread it. It's about 40 pages. But anyway, there were about 40 people applied. Only 12 districts in the state got it. We had the fourth highest score. Woo! We were pumped up. But here's the good part. It's a $1.5 million grant for Central Haywood High School over a period of 3 years. So, okay, this is a good part. You're going to love this. So I think one of the reasons we got it is we tried to capture the heart of that school and those kids. And I think it helped that several of us have worked in high schools and been a part of that. And we know those students down there deserve every opportunity, just as my child deserves. There's no difference. But the four main parts of that grant were just to clarify the vision of the school, to unify and focus on a new vision for Central Haywood High School to improve some processes and the climate and the culture of that school, some operational procedures, some discipline processes. Obviously, we want to improve the instruction and the academic achievement of those students, and to provide a lot of professional development for our teachers. With this federal grant, and Dr. Bill can talk about, it's kind of like the grant that the early college received early on. We had to identify a partner that was going to be in with us for 3 years that would be on site providing really quality professional development. We interviewed several. There were like 5 people you could pick. We interviewed those early on, and we went with a group called Drive Education. And we have really enjoyed working with them so far. They really focus heavily on culture and climate. So they will be along this journey with us. So we're excited to have them on board. But the fourth component, I think, is where the passion and the vision came. And I think you'll really appreciate this, but we want these kids to really be able to leave Central Haywood and access our community college and those resources that are there. And I see Mr. Haney shaking his head. We want to expand their course selection. We want to expand on the great partnership we've got with the community college. And, you know, right now our Central Haywood students did not have always reliable transportation to get to access those college courses. And so with this grant, we will have the money to do that for them. And my hope is when they leave Central Haywood, they will leave with a certificate, not only a diploma, but a certificate of some sort in their hand too, that they can see that their education is important and there's an end game for them there. I can't remember which board member, I don't know, it was when I first got the job, and I think it might have been Dr. Rogers that said, you know, I really want to see that expanded. I did too. I mean, I think that is a huge component for these students. And so we have got a beautiful golden opportunity with this grant. So I'm super excited. We did have to submit, a budget. It does provide a lot of good resources. And one thing is that the grant required hiring a full-time 12-month grant coach. And so that position, we are getting our heads together right now and figuring out kind of what that position is going to look like and what kind of support they will provide the school and our incoming new principal, Wendy Rogers, but there will be someone there full time. Central Haywood has a half-time counselor. We have money to provide an additional half-time counselor. So Central Haywood will have a full-time counselor, and our hope is that counselor will be able to provide some mental health and therapeutic services also. So we're excited about that. I know when I was at Pisgah and Tuscola, they have 2, we call them career coaches that are funded by a grant through the community college, and they're on our campus full-time. They serve as a liaison with the community college. We put in this grant to have a half-time career coach, so that we will have somebody at Central Haywood High School that can connect these kids to the community college and these classes too. There was also money included in that we wrote in to make sure that there was a science lab that was there for our students to access. And I know we've talked about a science lab in the past. So there will be money there to help outfit a science lab and possibly any other future vocational, if we had a big following in one course, maybe to provide equipment for that. So I just wanted to give you just an overall view of that. I'm super excited about it and want to thank everyone that worked hard on that. So what questions do you have for me?
Congratulations.
Yeah, no questions, but congratulations. Great job. And just keep them grants coming.
Mr. Francis, Jill Barker was quick to appropriately praise a lot of people who helped her, but please know that she's not just making the announcement. She did also a lot of the work. Very proud of our people who worked on that, and I think it's going to be a really good thing for that school.
Hey, Jill, this is Ronnie Clark. Good job. I thank you for doing that. I do have a question. We did have the electrical program at the Haywood at the high school, do they still have that going on at joint with the college and all?
Yeah, they do. And Mr. Haney can step in and talk to you about that. I think, Ronnie, too, and I'm not saying we won't still have it on site there, but I think if maybe that didn't work in their schedule or whatever, they could, they're going to be able to access some of the advanced classes too, because we'll be able to transport them there now. So our idea is to run a bus, and I see Mr. Shepherd looking, and I've told him this preliminary, but, you know, we'll be shuffling kids every period. You know, if they're at Pisgah or Tuscola, they hitch a ride or they drive. And so we need to provide some type of transportation for these students who, you know, it's a mile and a half down the road to, so they can access this. Do you want to say anything about the electrical program, Mr. Haney?
Yes, ma'am, I do. Mr. Clark, that's been very successful down at Central Haywood High School. One of the things that we're thinking about is a lot of those students are not academically motivated. You know, math, science, English is not necessarily their forte, but we can put something in front of them doing hands-on, and they can be very successful in life. And, you know, we might have I ran into a guy the other day that just graduated from Central Haywood High School last week. And I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm working construction. I love it." So he loves the hands-on stuff. And we have not been able to offer that to those students in a long time. So this will give us the opportunity to partner with HCC and offer them some opportunities that for those kids that want to get into welding or plumbing or automotive, they'll be able to do that. Jimmy Rogers, I see you on my screen. If you'll remember, we had a kid at Central Haywood that come down and helped you some, and he was a good kid. So we've just got to get them opportunities that they've not had before.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that too. I mean, I'm thankful for that program, and it don't just apply there. You take some of the machine shop at Pisgah. Over the years, I've noticed that program. You've got some child, if he's sitting in that math class, he ain't worth a flip. But if he wants to make that certain so many degrees in a trinket or whatever, he can do that, because like you say, that's hands-on, that's touching it, that's knowing what they're doing. And yeah, I've had several kids over the years from Central Haywood that's helped me in my business out here on part-time, and I think they enjoyed it. Most of them were really great, and they learned, I hope. And that's just, I'm hoping that we have that opportunity for more businesses. And I know it's available in this county, and sometimes I think we may not let it be known that these kids do have an opportunity to work after school or on these projects. So I think that's, yeah, let's just keep building on that, because somebody's going to have to work on your vehicle sometime or another, and somebody's going to have to build you a house, and somebody's going to have to roof it and shingle it and plumb it and etc. So thanks again. So, and thank you, Mr. Haney, for what you've done on it. And Ms. Barker, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Jeff. I agree with what Jimmy said, and thank you guys very much. That more than answered my questions. I think it's an awesome program, but thank you. Good job, Jill.
This is exactly the kind of expansion that we want to see, and the kind of success stories that we want to have. And I'll tell you, Jill, if 2 or 3 more grants like this, you'll pay your own salary.
Oh, okay, that made me laugh. I love that. But you know, honestly, at the end of the day, and I'm not just saying this, but this is about those kids. And those are great kids. I had these kids at Bethel. They're great kids. Everybody, there's so many paths kids can take now. It's not a one-stop shop of high school. Like, just give kids an avenue and a venue, and they'll be successful. So we're just super excited about that. And now the real hard work is going to have to be done. So I appreciate y'all, and thank you for that. Any other questions? Okay, I'll go. I want to talk about, it's on the agenda, it's listed as summer academic enhancement. There's really a new term for that, and it's called Jumpstart. So if you hear people in the community or out talking about summer enrichment, it's really called Jumpstart. It was in House Bill 1043. And again, it is a law that we will develop a remediation program or a jumpstart plan to provide a supplemental summer program for students whose learning had been negatively impacted due to COVID. That money, that program is for elementary students, kindergarten through 4th grade last year. They provided an allotment specifically for this program, and we have a plan that is due by June 22nd in order for that money to drop, and we have to submit a budget to, and we got the guidance last week, Ms. Shipman, I believe. So we have worked hard on that. The interesting piece of this legislation is 50% of that money has to be spent on students who were in 2nd and 3rd grade last year. Well, and the reason for that is most of the research supports that kids, if they're struggling to read after 3rd grade, it's really, really hard to intervene. So it looks like the state really wanted to focus a lot of that funds on the kids that were in 2nd and 3rd grade last year to make sure their reading and math skills were online. The intent of this legislation is this is outside of our calendar next year. It is either has to be done prior to school. In fact, 50% of that money has to be spent prior to August 17th. So it has to be prior to school. Even though the funds don't expire until December, we could use some of the rest of the money after school tutoring. So with that being said, we have met with our elementary principals. There are 8 of them, and Miss Shipman and I. There were 10 of us in a room. She spread everyone out because sometimes you just have to do that. And we had some great discussions. I told them I didn't want them to focus on the money. I wanted them to focus on the best practices, what they think those kids need when school starts. And I talked to principals about that yesterday. 2 things. We can't focus on the past with our kids. We have kids that will come to school on grade level. We had kids that grew during this time, that had people work with them. So we can't start school and be remediating every single person in the room. The key to this is going to be really differentiating for our kids and knowing where they are on that first day. So if we have a plan A, or whatever, that we can go ahead and we've had them assessed and we can move forward with them. There needs to be a sense of urgency about this. This needs to be quick, intensive, and we need to make sure, and I've talked to our principals about this, these kids don't lose any more ground. So we got a lot of work to do. With that being said, the Haywood County plan is very tentative at this point, but again, we're working on solidifying that. But the guidance is tricky with all these documents. I'll just be honest with you. So we don't want to do anything wrong. We want to hold the letter of the law, but we also what we want to do is do what's best for our kids. We have, and Ms. Shipman's here too to jump in, Kim, if I miss anything. But what we're thinking is a camp that is similar to the RTA, the Read to Achieve camps that we've run in elementary school in years past. We put really effective teachers with students and saw some good gains. The thing with those camps is we only hosted those on 2 sites in our county. Well, the principals now, they want their kids in their building. They want, every one of those principals today was like, okay, I need my kids. The focus will be on, next year's 3rd and 4th graders. And so what we had talked about and where we are with that is we want to bring those students in. We want to formatively assess them. And the state has provided some really good assessments. We want to provide some tutoring. And then whenever whatever kind of start we have, the teachers will have that part done. They can already have a strategic plan, gauge where the gaps are, and we can start with that sense of urgency on day 1. So we know these are critical years. And so that is where we are with that right now. When we get that submitted, I heard Dr. Bill say earlier, we want to come back and tell you the details of all those. But I just wanted to let you know, if you heard about Jumpstart or Summer, that's what that is. What questions do you have for me about that? Okay, and again, thank you to Ms. Shipman and I. We've had some really good conversations with our principals, and they miss their kids, and they really are, really want to get them back and get them where they need to be. Staff Development Day, I think y'all know in the past, and I don't know how many years, Dr. Bill, we've been doing a Staff Development Day where our staff they get a menu of options, and we usually do 2 half days, and they get to pick their options. And we had 90% of those presenters scheduled in March. We had them lined up. They were coming. I mean, there's a lot of pre-preparation had to be done. We were going to register teachers in May, and COVID happened, and we held on that. Dr. Bill's advice is just hold on, hold on. And we held on for a long time. I think the reality started setting in when presenters started calling and saying, we can't really commit. Some of the presentations had 100 people in a room. This mixes people all over the county. They're, they can take different sessions. We have them at different schools. So, and I think we just were really worried if we didn't have the start that we wanted to, where everybody is there, then it might have to be canceled. So with that being said, we proposed a new schedule to principals that was developed out of our curriculum instruction staff. And I hadn't heard anything from them yet. So no news is good news. They seem to really appreciate it that day. But in general, what we decided to do is we are going to have all the staff will be at their home school. So they could be in their cafeteria or their media center, but they will be together. And we will have a virtual opening, and Dr. Nolte is he'll provide a welcome, a motivation, some appreciation, some schedules, and just talk about the school year. And so that would be part of it. We want Dr. Putnam to come on and really talk about, and again, our audience is teachers. We want him to talk to teachers about the CDC guidance and safety and all those pieces that will be on their minds. We realize that this is what is going to be on our staff's minds when they come back. I would spend a period of time just talking about a remote learning plan that's required by the state that I'll get to in a minute. We'd take a break, and then we would come back and break out into 3 sections where elementary teachers would go to 1 meeting, middle and high. During that time, Brandy Stevenson would address some very critical legal EC guidance for classroom teachers. We wanted to talk about formative assessments. Jeff Haney and Carol Fox would tag team on the middle and high school breakout sessions. Jason Hines gave a great idea that we probably need a piece in there on mental health. So to prepare teachers and students when they come back for some of the things they'll be facing. And he had a good idea for someone that could possibly do that. And then we wanted to spend part of the afternoon with Google Classroom expectations. We kind of, it was an emergency last year. If we go to remote learning now, it's not going to be an emergency anymore. So we've got, we're going to require to have this plan. And we want to make sure that is our learning platform that we use in Haywood County is Google Classroom. So we wanted to make sure we provided just a baseline training for everybody because we know our staff are in different places with that. And Kim was excited about doing that. And she was going to train our media coordinators and let that roll out. And then hopefully they would have some time left where they could do at their schools. They could address some remote learning there. Any questions just about a different looking staff development day or any suggestions you have for that August 12th day? Okay. Last but not least, this beautiful remote learning plan that was required by the state. It looks like it's just 3 pages and 15 components. But the interesting thing is it has 33 pages of guidance that go along with it and all these links. And it's great. So this remote learning, it is really, really good. It is a really good document to get us through our plan for next year. This will only need to be used if we were to be on option C and we were remote learning again. There is when we talk about blended learning, that means they may be at school some, they may be at home some. There are some pieces in that. What is addressed in here are things like staff expectations, plans for kids that have limited connectivity, how do people submit assignments, students with disabilities, what kind of equal access do they have, meeting the needs of our English language learners, AIG learners, our homeless students served under McKinney-Vento. How are we going to do attendance in remote learning? So pieces last time that we really didn't have to think about, the way the governor's legislation rolled out, that this time it won't be an emergency anymore. We'll have a plan. And so there's a lot of pieces to that. Kim Jackson has already surveyed our parents about connectivity. And I don't know if she's on right now, but it looks like the survey responses. Dr. Bill, were you going to talk about that, or do you want me to touch on that?
Yeah, I'll do it. Kim's on there also. Just very quickly, we did for the remote learning plan, and when I say we, it was Kim and mainly the principals contacting people from the schools. We did a survey of high-speed connectivity for our students. We had a great response, over 60%, over 4,000 responses. And we're right at about 15% that do not have access. So, you can do the math on that. 15% of 7,000 students is a load of people who do not have access. We know that number is much higher because we very strongly suspect that those that did not respond are a good portion of those who did not have access and could give us a response. So that was part of that. I don't know, Kim, if you want to add anything or not, but that was part of the planning for the remote learning document we had to put together, and it should also help us move forward into next year, knowing a little bit more about who has it and who does not.
I'll close with this plan is due July 20th. And so, like as Dr. Bill was saying earlier, on July 1, we'll know some direction on which way we're going to go. But again, this is really for option C, that we've got a good plan in place that we can communicate. And yeah, any questions just about the remote learning plan or suggestions?
Thank you, Jill. Next, we have Dr. Putnam, I believe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I want to go over just a quick update on athletics. I know that's been a burning question. When could we resume? The governor urged or asked the High School Athletic Association to consider that, and the North Carolina High School Athletic Association, in conjunction with the Department of Health and Human Services, has lifted the dead period. If you'll remember, we've been in a dead period where no physical participation amongst athletes was permitted. They have lifted that dead period, and it's effective on or after June 15th. So that's this coming Monday. We held a virtual meeting with all of our athletic directors today. We also had all of our trainers in the forum. We also had Marty Stamey, and we had a physician's assistant from Southeastern Sports present as well. And I'll give you the short, and then I'll give you the details. The short is Monday, both of our high schools will begin by having an information day and an orientation. So Monday will serve as information and orientation day for both Pisgah and Tuscola. On Tuesday, they will begin conditioning and workouts. This is not, the High School Athletic Association has not authorized competitions of any kind. It is only summer workouts and conditioning. And our middle schools are considering a start date of July 6th. They want a little bit of time to adjust. It's a little different with middle school because, you know, mamas and daddies have to be able to participate and drop them off and pick them up. So that is what the official kickoff for athletics looks like. I want to talk to you about some particulars in case you have questions about those or ask questions about those. There are basically, in regards to masks, masks are not required, but the recommendation is not to wear a mask while respirating. Well, if you're coming to condition or work out, essentially masks are off limits anyway, because if we're doing that properly and we're doing workouts and conditioning, respiration is a part of that. And so masks are optional. Our coaches will be instructed that if a child feels more comfortable wearing a mask, by all means let them wear the mask, but we will certainly have to limit respiration if they so choose to wear one. Gloves. Gloves are not recommended, and the reason gloves are not recommended, they are just like hands. They can transfer COVID the same as a hand can, and they give folks a false sense of security. So gloves will not be worn either. Cleaning. Each school is establishing a cleaning plan. Cleaning will be key. They will follow cleaning, proper cleaning, with number 16 or number 19 in our blend stations. And I know you don't know what those are, but our custodians do. They're effective against COVID, number 16 and number 19 in our blend stations, so they will properly clean. And following that proper cleaning, they will use the Victory electrostatic sprayer, which essentially, if any of you have ever watched cars being painted, it uses a covalent process where oppositely charged particles attract to one another. And so the fogger or Ghostbuster machine, as Dr. Nolte likes to call it, will be used following proper cleaning. Cleaning will occur between pods or groups of kids occupying or using a facility. And then they will also be used for equipment of any kind that is after each individual use. So between groups and between individual uses where equipment's involved and an athlete comes in direct contact with it. We will also, the coaches, the athletic directors will make sure that proper kill time is adhered to per the chemical specifications. So they'll have to allot time between rotations of trying to make sure proper time has been allowed for kill time for these chemicals. They've also been asked to ensure that all porous areas are covered per the Department of Health and Human Services recommendations, and to communicate with parents that workout clothes worn to these really needs to be taken home and washed individually, not with the family load of clothes. They need to be washed separately just in case any contamination exists on the clothing, articles of clothing that they wore to the workout. Gathering sizes stay at 25 per the governor's order. 25 does include the coach. 25 outside, and gathering sizes inside will remain at 10 to include the coach or trainers, anyone who's inside that same area together. Those groups the same coach will stay in pod or group every day. And what I ask athletic directors to do is think about contact tracing. If we were forced to contact trace, if a coach has worked with 4 different groups of 25, we would be trying to contact trace 100 kids. So that coach is to remain with the same kids every single day. Outside in determining areas, area is a pretty big old word. What constitutes an area? The guidance I've provided in regards to area. Area will be considered anything that can maintain a separate entrance and exit. And an area will lend itself to prevent cross-contamination. So we're not going to split hairs with coaches on what an area is. We're simply making sure that people entering that area and exiting that area do not cross paths with anyone in any other area. Physical requirements, reminded them of physical requirements, and they will need to have, if they have an existing physical issued on March 1 of 2019 and between 5/1/2020, they will not need a new physical. They've been granted a temporary 1-year extension. Anything prior to March 1st, 2019, they will have to have a pre-participation physical. We will have screening stations. There's some paperwork associated with this. The first thing that parents and students will have to fill out, it's an initial screening questionnaire. Have you or your child, I'm going to give you some examples. Have you or your child been quarantined in the last 2 months? They will have to answer those questions and fill that out. That's the pre-participation or initial screening questions. Daily, they will be checked by an athletic trainer. They'll have their temperature checked, and the coach will be responsible for maintaining a daily monitoring form. Every day they're asked wellness questions. Do you have a fever? Have you been nauseous? Every day they will be asked a set of questions and have their temperature checked. And that the head coach for those sports will maintain those records. And so they'll keep those on file. So that's a lot of information in a short amount of time. I'm going to pause and let y'all ask me any questions you may have about athletics. Wow, surely I didn't explain it that well.
If we're going to ask any questions regarding athletics, I'll just go ahead and ask the hardest one.
Okay.
Who's going to Pensacola game?
Hopefully it'll be a tie.
I think we know where this is about to go. So just
next subject.
Yeah, Dr. Roderick, you open something up now, brother.
Dr. Putman, will you please talk about the coaching supplement plan?
Yes, sir. I'd be happy to.
Good move.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Nolte, for letting me off the hook. All right. So before I have presented a coaching supplement plan, I do want to give special thanks to Mr. Jim Harley Francis for encouraging us to take a look at that. And I do want to thank the support. I know Mr. Burnett and Dr. Rogers and all of you have made positive comments in support of making sure our coaches are justly compensated, at least as well, if not better than other area. So I appreciate your support in that. And that said, I'm going to give you some numbers here. If you'll remember, we had a miscalculation earlier in earlier information we provided. But essentially how this will work, their current coaching supplement base remains unaffected. That is the amount you have already approved. It's the amount that we've used for many years, and that portion of the money remains unchanged. What has changed to incentivize our employees to become employee coaches, if they are an employee coach, we will incentivize them by giving them 1% for their years of service. So they'll get the already approved coaching supplement you have authorized and that has been used for many years. But in addition to that, an employee who becomes head coach, who is willing to serve as our head coach, they will receive 1% over and above that supplement. And that 1% is based off their years of teaching experience. So who all does this apply to? I just want to be sure we're clear on this. So this is an employee, on-staff employee who is willing to serve as a head coach. This also applies to our athletic directors. The total cost, before the increase, the total cost for paying coaching supplements is $245,492. That's what we paid last year. The 1% increase to incentivize employee head coaches and athletic directors is $45,292. So the net difference in what we paid last year and what we would pay in the coming year, if you were to approve this Monday night, would be $45,292 additional dollars in the way of compensation for employee head coaches and athletic directors. The other thing that was asked for me to take a look at, we formed a group or a committee that looked at this, was to look at our middle school athletic directors. And the difference to what was determined by the group is that our middle school athletic directors, their supplements needed to be adjusted. And we made that in alignment with the high school athletic directors. The total cost of doing that is $3,882. That's, again, $3,882. If you combine that with the $45,292 for head coaches, that brings the net difference to $49,174.22 to complete this coaching supplement plan. Are there any questions for me on that?
Now, this is just going to be head coaches and athletic directors, only two that's getting this?
Yes, sir. That is correct.
Just a little more information, board. You will remember, some of you may have seen me flipping through a big notebook while Dr. Putman was talking. I grabbed the budget notebook. You'll remember when we presented the budget to you all that we said this was not a budget expansion year. And the only really things that we were considering for a budget expansion was the potential of someone who could do therapeutic services and bill for us, and that would come out of state funds. We'll bring that through regular personnel meeting. That's state money. And then we talked about the possibility of this coaching supplement plan that was put together by a committee, and you had representation on that committee. I told you at that time that, you know, we would consider this later. It would not be a budget increase if we approved it, and that it would be brought forth once we tried to verify the numbers as much as possible, and once we determined what we would actually spend out of fund balance. You remember early on in our actualized budget, we had the potential of spending about 1.5 or 1.6 million of fund balance. And we have come way under that the last couple of years, what we thought we were going to spend, moving toward a total actualized budget. And right now we're at about 400,000. We don't think it's going to be a lot more than that. So that was just additional information. It may be too much information for you, but we've been very frugal on spending, and we would not change the overall budget that we have. We would just, you know, any increase would not add to the budget total, but we would, you know, look at appropriate lines and try to find those funds. And if we continue to be very frugal, that will not be a problem.
Okay. Anything else for Dr. Putnam? Last item is Mr. Hines, correct?
Mr. Chair, I have one.
Oh yeah, you got your summer up there.
Summer project.
Yeah, don't let me forget that.
Okay. I want to point out we had 39 summer projects slated. As of today, 21 of those are complete. 3 are 50% complete. 1 is 80% complete, and 8 have been contracted. So we are well ahead of schedule. If you consider that progress while also demolitioning the building, that's a pretty heavy lift there on the part of our maintenance department. So very grateful for doing it. Also, wanted to let you know that asbestos removal and abatement is complete inside the building, and it passed air quality monitoring today. So we're free to enter the building now, free of asbestos. It passed air quality monitoring. And I believe the roofers are set to begin here in the very near future. And I'm sorry, I'm just not able to recall that date, but they're on schedule to begin work on roof replacement. I know that Josh and the maintenance guys are set to begin demolition on the bottom floor. They may begin tomorrow, but definitely Monday. So we're on target and on project and on task for completion of that building. So wanted to bring you up to date on those capital projects.
Thanks to Josh. He's doing a great job. So, you know, y'all are moving along a lot faster than I expect things to go, but I know the COVID's kind of helped in that situation in a way that got a lot of projects done that we normally would not be able to do. Thanks.
I'll be sure and pass that along. Thank you.
Please do.
Hey, Dr. Putnam.
Sir.
I know you said something about abatement, but I picked up a lot of interference and I missed about half of what you said.
Okay. The asbestos abatement and removal is complete. And we got confirmation today that it passed the air quality monitoring that is required following asbestos removal. And so the building is free and clear of asbestos and ready to occupy.
That's awesome.
Very good. Anything else, Dr. Putnam?
I believe that's it.
Dr. Putnam, this is Jim. I've got one more question for you. Going back to athletics, as far as the assistant coaches, are we going to? Is that something that's going to come up at the board meeting Monday night? Because I know there was some questions about having more assistants for certain sports.
Per the recommendations, we're going to adjust those. And basically, there were some inequities and misdistributions here or there, but we're going to correct those per the group's discussion.
Thank you, sir.
Board members, we're getting a lot of feedback from somewhere. We need to watch what we're doing on a microphone.
Telephone.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can get back in there.
Next, we have Mr. Hines on our agenda.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Dr. Nolte wanted me to update you tonight on the state emergency due to COVID-19. The state extended the state emergency sick leave through June 15th as a final stop for the entire state. But they did put caveat in there that you would end the state emergency sick leave when your school calendar ends. So for us, that was June 8th. So no employees would be able to access the state emergency sick leave after June 8th. And with the school year ending and going into the summer, 10-month employees would not access it anyway. So we had a few 3 or 4 12-month employees, mainly custodians, who were taking advantage of the state emergency sick leave that we had to work with to come up with an alternative. The federal sick leave is still available. It will be available through December 1st. And as we've talked about before, period, for the state emergency sick leave, for the federal sick leave, they would have to use their own accumulated leave or take leave without pay. And then once that kicked in, the federal would pay for 10 days worth of leave. And they could access up to 12 weeks without pay. So only 2 weeks of the 12 are paid by the federal. Unless you're actually sick with COVID-19, the federal leave is basically a wash because you have to use 10 days to get 10 days. Now, if you were actually sick or something like that, then it would make sense to use the federal leave and save at least 10 days of your own. So that really wasn't a help to most people. Thankfully, they are not sick, and most of those 12-month employees have decided to come to work and are back in the buildings working and seem to be doing fine with that. We do 6 to 8 clerical employees who are working from home or working remotely. And that is still authorized by when the governor lifts the order and is not recommending remote work anymore. So unless they choose to come back on their own for whatever reason. But that's the update. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I don't mean to be tough, Mr. Hines, but it's probably a wonderful world of internet service. I lost a lot of that. It's cutting out, and we missed some of the conversation anyway. Or I did it.
I did too.
Let me try the high points. I think that must be a connection. Let me try the high points. I think that might be a connection near Mr. Hines' location. he was explaining that the state sick leave ended when school ended, so it's not available anymore. He explained that the federal sick leave really doesn't benefit our employees any because you have to take your own leave first and you lose that, and then you get some federal leave, and it's really a wash and is only really helpful for people who actually have COVID-19. And then the last item that he talked about has suddenly escaped my mind. The remote telework at home is still in effect and highly recommended by the state, but we do expect that might end when we enter phase 3. So I didn't do as good a job as him, but hopefully you heard me a little better.
Thank you, Dr. Nolly, and Mr. Hines, thank you too. This is just one thing I'd like to say. What a wonderful world of internet connections.
Dr. Noel, did you have anything else you want to bring tonight, or?
Just very quickly, I know everyone is curious about administrative positions. We did fill a couple at our last special called meeting. I have been interviewing feverishly with Dr. Putnam and Mrs. Barker. I think we interviewed 7 people today. We had done previous interviews with about a half a dozen people. I also had not some interviews, but some direct conversations with people who already work for us just to see about their interest. And I will tell you that for the remaining openings, we did get some pleasant surprises in our conversations. We are going to meet at 7 in the morning. Mrs. Barker and Dr. Putnam and I will be comparing our notes and try to come up with a plan that we think is appropriate and viable. And if we are able to come up with that, we'll certainly let you know, even if I have to call each of you individually and sort of tell you what we're thinking. I know that's not a vote or anything like that, but just to keep you up to speed. So we'll try to not bring you any surprises on Monday with whatever we can put together.
Thank you, Dr. Nolte, for the update, and just keep us in the loop, and we'll take whatever action we need to take to get things rolling. I guess that concludes our meeting tonight, and thanks, board members, for your attendance, and we look forward to meeting again Monday.